Hey everybody, Charlie Stevens here. Thank you so much for tuning in to another guitar lesson. Alright, so I'd like to learn about movable power chords today. In our last lesson we learned about open power chords, and there are a few of those that involve open strings. But for me, power chords are much more useful in these movable chord forms. Okay? So let's quickly review what a power chord is. So if you haven't watched that video, the best way to review is to check that out because I go more in depth. But briefly, we learned that a power chord is the same thing as the interval of a perfect fifth, and we learned a certain shape for it. So for instance, we learned our E power chord, and we learned that we had the note E, which is the root of this chord. If we're playing an E power chord, the note that is the root is E. Okay? So we have our E power chord, okay, and we learned that from the root we would go one string this way and 2 frets that way. So the reason I'm pointing is because I think about both those directions as up because they're higher in pitch. If I'm on my guitar and I go from this string, low E, to the A, that's higher in pitch, right? So I might say you go up to that string, but physically it's actually down, right? So we go one string towards our toes, 2 frets towards our pick. So let's say it that way, right? Because this is also up. Going this way is also up in pitch. So yeah, I'm going to say like that. When we go one string towards our toes, we go 2 frets towards our pick. And that's the shape we learned, okay? And that was true on the open strings. That's still going to be true when we move this, okay? But now we just won't have an open string to do it, okay? So, if let's say we wanted to play an F power chord, how would we do that? Well, if you are familiar with the musical alphabet, then you know that F is the very next letter in our musical alphabet after E. If you're not familiar with the musical alphabet, please watch the video I made about that. It's on this channel. And we explain what the musical alphabet is in that video. But basically, we use letters from the English alphabet, A through G. Okay, but that's 7. We actually have 12 different pitches in our tuning system that we use in Western music. So there are 5 missing. They don't get their own letter names. They are called sharps and flats. So almost every letter has a sharp after it, except for 2, except for E and B. Both those have no sharps. Okay, so if that was a little quick for you, please go watch the lesson on the musical alphabet. But for everybody else that maybe is already sort of familiar with that, just a quick review, E and B have no sharp, okay? So that means that if I wanted to play an F power chord, I could make my root 1/2 step higher. So my root was here on E, so I could actually play F instead. That is 1/2 step higher. Now I'm on the note F, right? Now I can do this same shape starting on the note F, and F will be my root. Okay, so I'm on F here on the 1st fret of the low E string. Now I'm going to go one string this way. That puts me to the 5th string or the A string. I have to go 2 frets this way now, right? So that puts me here to the 3rd fret. That's an F power chord now. Sounds like Star Wars, right? That was one of the things we learned in the last video, to check and see if it sounded like a perfect fifth by seeing if it sounded like the Star Wars theme. This one does, so that's probably right. We also learned that they're always supposed to be 5 letters away from each other in the alphabet. That's what a perfect fifth is. So we started on F. What is 5 letters away from that? F, G, alphabet starts over back at A, B, C. So a fifth away from F is C. Okay, well we followed our pattern. Let's check. Is this the note C that we're playing here? Well, what string are we on? The 5th string, right, which is the A string. So played open, that's the note A. Here on the 1st fret, what is that? A sharp. A is one of the ones that has a sharp after it, like most of them do, right? So that was it for A. We've exhausted A and its sharp option. Now we're moving on to the next letter of the alphabet, which is B, right? Does B have a sharp after it? No. B is one of the only notes that doesn't have a sharp after it. E and B. Okay, so that means the very next fret here is the next letter in the alphabet already. After B comes C. All right, hey, that's what we wanted. We had F to C. We said that was a fifth. We tried our shape, and that's exactly what we got. So that's verified. This is the perfect fifth, which is also known as a power chord. Whew! All right, so that's how you go through those steps, okay? Really important for you to understand that so you can move these shapes wherever you want and play whatever chord that you need to, okay? But that is a little bit much to go through all those, and really you can just memorize the shape and move it around. But you do need to know where the root is, right? You need to have some understanding of your guitar. So if you needed to play, say, a G power chord, I could say G. This one's F, I know that. Would it be one fret higher? Let's see. Does F have a sharp after it? Yes, F has a sharp after it. So if I move this whole shape one fret higher than F, I'm on F sharp, not G. But I'm looking for G. So how far do I have to move it again? Well, F, the next letter in the alphabet, is G. So after F sharp comes G. Oh, hey, I knew that. I knew that this note was a G because I see it in my G chord. I also learned that when we learned our notes on the sixth string, right? We learned that this one was a G. Okay, so we can verify that. So I can start my G here and do that same shape and get a power chord. Pretty cool, right? So that's G. If I want a G sharp, you can get that right here. If I moved it one higher, now I'm an A. Hey, that's great. I already knew a place to play an A power chord from our last video though on the open string. Okay, so instead of going all the way up here, I could just switch to here if I wanted to. Play that on the open. I have two options for that one. Okay, now we can keep this pattern going. If I wanted to move this and root things off of my fifth string, I can build power chords here too. So this one would be an A sharp, also known as B flat. It's the note between A and B on the first fret of the fifth string. Move that again higher. Now it's a B power chord. Again here, C. C sharp, D. Hey, I already had a D on the open ones. Okay, so now do you see how many different possibilities for chords we have with this one shape? It's a lot, huh? It's pretty cool. Okay, so the other benefit of these power chords are they're really working towards bar chords, okay? Understanding how we can start on a note and that note is the root, and how we can build a shape from that note to get a chord is a really important concept, and these power chords are directly related to bar chords. If I were to do this F power chord or an F bar chord, the power chord is in there. It's just like we were talking about when we looked at an E chord and we saw the E open power chord was in there, but if we added the entire chord, we could still do that, but that part is contained in there, right? So this is a really important step to being able to play bar chords. We're learning where our notes are and how to treat that as the root and to apply a shape to it. So we've been learning about these two-note chords, which is really cool, but we can actually double the root as well, and we can play three strings. Okay, so we went one string towards our toes and two up towards our pick, right? If we go from that note, one more string towards our toes there, well, that's the interval of an octave away from our first note. Here's F on the first fret of low, E. That's an F on the third fret of the D. Okay, right in between there is the perfect fifth. So we can actually play all three of those. This is still called a power chord. And one thing I like about this is it can be a little bit tricky to strum power chords if we're used to strumming full chords, because sometimes we might be used to strumming 4, 5, or 6 strings at the same time, and going to power chords where we're only strumming 2 notes at a time can be a little challenging. So this is nice because I get 3, and I'm still kind of only aiming for these 2, But I have this other one squeezed down here, so if I accidentally get a third one, that's okay too. So I'm sort of aiming for 2, but I'm allowed to get a third because I'm squeezing it down and it's in there too. Okay. So if I were to move this, so this was an F here, F sharp here, we said it was G, right? And now I've doubled the G. So the notes I'm playing are G, D, and G again. Hey, that's very similar to this G5 we learned. We had G, D, G, D, and G. This one has a lot of G's and D's. But when we called this G5, the reason this chord is called G5 is because it is a power chord. So I wanted to point that out too. This chord technically is a power chord. Okay, but typically when I think of power chords, for a G power chord, I would think more like this. Okay, and you might see me use my 3rd finger and then my 4th finger. That's a very good way to do it, especially when we learn how to add the rest of the bar chord. Our 2nd finger might be needed to do that. Sometimes you'll see me do this like this though, with my 2nd finger and 3rd finger there. Okay, either one is acceptable. It kind of depends on what we're playing and personal preference and things like that. But I want to make you aware of both of these. If this one is hard for you, try this one. Okay, this one might be hard for you because you're not used to using the pinky, but this one is good. I would say if I had to only use one or the other, I'd probably choose this one with fingers 1, 3, and then 4. But it's also good to use 1, 2, and then 3, okay? Those are our 2 main shapes for these movable power chords. Okay, so we have the octave. We can do this same thing on our 5th string root. So let's say I want to do a C power chord. A sharp, B, C is here on the 3rd fret. Got a 5th here, followed by pattern to find that. It's the 5th. Happens to be a G note in this case, and the octave. Another C. Okay, so I can do that here. I can get all 3 of these notes the same shape here or here. So this is a G because this note is G. This is a C because this note is a C. Okay? Here's why I mostly stick to these 2 strings to start these. In our last video we learned that we can do this on D as well, right, with the open. So could we move that around? Well, technically yes, of course we could, right? We could go to the 1st fret and the 3rd fret, that would follow that shape. But now when I go to do my octave, it's not on the same fret anymore. If I went and followed that same pattern where I put something down over here, now on the 3rd fret of the B string, ooh, a very pretty chord you get there. Sounds groovy, but it's not a power chord, okay? I would have to move this one up 1 fret. Because of the B string, the tuning between the B string, the tuning between the G and the B string, this distance right here, is different than the distance between any of our other 2 adjacent strings by exactly 1 fret. So I'd have to change that one up. Okay, so if you like this one, that's okay. You can use power chords rooted off your 4th string if you want to. I personally just don't really do that. If I wanted this one here, this is a D sharp, I would find that right here and play it here on my A string as a root. I would use my A string as a root to play that rather than my D string. Okay, but it's the same chord. Okay, so that's why it's really important to know some of the notes on our guitar, and I really think that the low E and the A are a great place to start. Okay, I had a guitar teacher once tell me that he thinks that 90% of guitarists don't know their fretboard well enough and don't know the names of their notes. And I think that there's a good argument to be made for that. There's a lot of shapes and things that we can rely on, like how we were moving these shapes around. I don't necessarily need to know that this is a D and this is a G. I know this is a G, and I can start my power chord there, and I know I'll get a G power chord. Right? I don't necessarily need to know those. I should, but I don't necessarily need to because I can rely on the shape, okay? That's good and bad. It's good because it can help us learn. but it also leads to what that guitar teacher was telling me, that sometimes people don't quite learn the guitar well enough because we rely too much on shapes. So that I consider more of an advanced guitarist problem. Once you get to a certain point, yeah, you want to be able to identify every note, right? But at first, that can be sort of overwhelming and probably not the best idea to approach it as such a large task. It's probably a better idea to take bite-sized chunks out of learning that. So what I found really helpful was starting with the E and the A string, because I got a lot of practical experience. I know this is G. If I have to play a chord that I'm rooting off of my 6th string, I have to start here if I want it to be G. If I want to use that same shape but now I want it to be C, I know I can go there or there, because I know that this note is C and I know that this note is C. I know the shape that applies to both, right? Yeah, so that's getting a little out there for some of you perhaps. For others maybe not. Maybe this is where you're at and a good challenge for you. But I'm just trying to make a point here that learning where these notes are can be really practical. With these power chords, we can move them around, okay? So that can be something that you can do. And you can watch that lesson on the musical alphabet, and you can always count through that. Never be afraid of not knowing what one of these notes are, because you can always figure it out. You can start at the open string. If you know what the open string is, and you know the musical alphabet, you can count up each one until you get there and say, that must be B. See, I knew that. I didn't go through the whole process. Should we double check me? E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A sharp, B. Right? Till eventually I just knew that. If I wanted to play a power chord here for B, I know that's B. I also know this is B. Okay? So that's really great. That's helped me for other things too, not just power chords, is what I'm saying. Okay? This will also, I could know how to play a B minor bar chord, a B major bar chord. I could know that the B is the 3rd of my G major chord, and I could do sounded strange to play it after that, but that's a G major with a B in the bass, right? Lots of reasons why it's good to know the fingerboard, but it can be kind of hard to see some of those when we're new to the guitar. So this movable power chord thing is a really great practical way to get into that, okay? All right, well, I think that's all I have for you today. We're going to use our shape we learned. You can either do the shape that has only 2 strings, you can double the octave and do a shape with 3 strings, and you can root that on the 6th string or the 5th string, okay? And whatever fret you're at on one of those strings, whatever that note is called, that's the name of your power chord, okay? And you can just kind of go all up and down the neck. I don't know, just mess around, okay? It doesn't even matter if you know what you're doing. Just move these shapes around on those strings and have a little bit of fun. If you have any questions about that, please leave a comment. I'll try to make some more lessons soon where maybe we incorporate some of these power chords into some songs. Alright, well, thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe to the channel if you're enjoying this course, and I look forward to seeing you in another guitar lesson really soon. Thanks again. Bye.